Good morning. First of all, Barbara Face, what a gracious welcome from you. Pastor Kelly Walker Hart. Really lifting our spirits in music, inspiring us to act for justice. Jack Wineski, indeed, oh, what a beautiful morning. What a beautiful, beautiful morning. And making a connection as kindred spirits from Buffalo, New York, and there we go. And just the humility of the worship band telling me that you're the backup band. No, I'm your backup preacher. It is a great joy and honor to be with you this morning. Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation feels to me like home. I say this for a couple reasons. Number one is your senior pastor, Andy Burnett. I know Andy through our congregation's mutual membership and participation in the Valley Interfaith Project. Here's what I love and admire about your pastor. He's both the smartest guy in the room and the humblest. You know what I'm talking about. Andy walks the talk. Really, this is a courageous man. He has a backbone, and at the same time, he can respectfully listen to divergent views. And let's be honest, he's got a different resume than most UU pastors. Talk about a journey. And the second reason I feel at home here, you'll understand in a story. As this story goes, a group of travelers are in a boat in the open waters when one of them suddenly pulls out a hand drill and begins drilling a hole under his seat. Incredulous, the other travelers turn to him and say, "What are you doing?" And the man responds, "What concern of it is yours? I'm drilling under my own seat." And the others shout out in unison, "Because we're all in the same boat." What I love about this story, which comes from the heart of Jewish tradition, is that we don't know anything about the passengers in this boat. Are they Jewish, non-Jewish, a mixed multitude? We simply don't know, and that's precisely the point. As a rabbi, I understand that Jews are not only obligated to our fellow Jews, we're obligated to the whole of humanity. Indeed, brothers and sisters, Jews and UUs, it's got a good ring to it, we're kindred spirits. Yes, I'm not here this morning just to crank up the Amen choir. I'd like to give you a better understanding of what grounds me as a Jew in the common principles and values that we share. I would argue that the more connected we are to our respective faith traditions, the more powerfully and lovingly we can be of service to all of humanity. This morning, brothers and sisters, I invite you to look with me through a Jewish lens at what I view as a biblical paradox. Jews, as many people of faith, stand with one foot in the particular, parochial, and the other foot in the universal, expansive. So here's our particular. Jews are referred to as Am Kodesh, a holy people literally set apart from the other nations, distinct and, yes, even considered chosen. As is the nature of tribes, we instinctively care deeply about our own. The special covenant God made with our patriarch Abraham established our separateness from other people. Our rituals from birth through death reinforce our distinctive Jewish identities. And here, you'll be relieved to hear, is the universal. The biblical authors had a different vision for this nascent Israelite tribe. Our ancestors understood the perils of protectionism, of nativism, of cutting ourselves off from the other tribes and nations. The Israelites were also conceived in empathy, to feel the suffering of others, to always remember the most vulnerable, the orphan, the widow, the stranger in our midst. Our core narrative is the Exodus. We are to remember the stranger. Why? The answer echoes from generation to generation around the Passover table. For we were strangers in the land of Egypt. To be a Jew is to be expansive, to care for both those within the Jewish family and those outside. And this brings to mind the experience of a friend of mine and colleague, Rabbi David Stern, while in a Darfurian refugee camp back some years ago. He observed the simple numbered band used to measure the circumference of a child's arm. If the measurement is too small, the child is malnourished and in need of medical attention. Applying this metaphorically to our engagement both inside and outside the Jewish community, Rabbi Stern asks, what's the measure and circumference of our moral concern? How widely are we willing to care? He observed if the circumference of our attention, our compassion, our outrage is too narrow, then the kid is in trouble, and so are we. There is a Jewish mandate to care for others. The Bible expresses this. The Old Testament expresses this in many ways and more frequently than any of our parochial obligations. Remember the stranger, love your neighbor as you love yourself. You shall not remain indifferent. When we forget our covenant with God as a holy people, or misunderstand the notion of chosenness as being exceptional in any way, the prophet Amos channels God saying, "To me, O Israelites, you are just like the Ethiopians. True, I brought you up from the land of Egypt, but also the Philistines from Captor and the Armenians from Kir." At a time when faith traditions appeal to people's individual search for spiritual enlightenment, Jewish mysticism offers a counter-cultural myth as relevant today as it was when written some 500 years ago in the ancient city of Safat in the northern Galilee by Rabbi Isaac Luria. At the beginning of time, Luria imagined God's presence filled the universe. When God decided to bring this world into being to make room for creation, she first drew in her breath, contracting herself. From that contraction, darkness was created. And when God said, "Let there be light," the light came into being, filled the darkness, and 10 holy vessels came forth, each filled with the primordial light. In this way, God sent forth those 10 vessels like a fleet of ships, each carrying its cargo of light. But the vessels were too fragile to contain such a powerful divine light. They broke open, split asunder, and all the holy sparks were scattered like sand, like seeds, like stars. Those sparks fell everywhere. That's why, brothers and sisters, we were created, to gather the sparks no matter where they are hidden. God created the world so that the descendants of Adam and Eve, along with all the peoples of the earth, could raise up the holy sparks, and in this way, together, we will sift all the holy sparks from the four corners of the earth. And when enough holy sparks have been gathered, the broken vessels will be restored. The Hebrew expression tikkun olam, the repair of the world awaited so long, will finally be complete. Therefore, it should be the aim of everyone, all of us, to raise these sparks from wherever they are imprisoned and to elevate them to holiness by the power of their soul. And when the task of gathering the sparks nears completion, then, as the tradition has it, God will hasten the final redemption by collecting what remains of the holy sparks that went astray. So time and again, Judaism's theological principle is of a God that makes room for us, for humanity, to complete the work of creation. Even more than making room, Judaism is based on something that is a little bit of chutzpah. It's based on God's need for human beings. One of the great prophetic voices of the 20th century, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, expresses this in the title of his book, God in Search of Man. The measure of our spiritual life is in direct proportion to the degree with which we pursue justice and lead with compassion, gathering holy sparks each step of the way. Let me share with you a trip I made to Germany some 18 months ago. Like many Jews, for understandable reasons, I had never been to Germany, never had a desire to go. I was invited to travel to Berlin as part of an American rabbinic delegation. The purpose of the trip was, in part, to witness the remarkable work of an organization called IsraAid, an Israeli NGO engaged by the German government to help resettle some of the over 1 million refugees, mostly from the Middle East, because most of the refugee population speaks Arabic. IsraAid had assembled a staff that, in and of itself, represented an interfaith tapestry, with German and Arabic-speaking Jews, Christians, and Muslims, this remarkable constellation of relationships in this place should not be lost on anyone. Who could have imagined it a mere 70 years ago? And let me introduce you to one of the German volunteers I met. His name is Gerhart Bader. He is a member of the Berlin Jewish community. Each week, he travels from one side of this sprawling city to the other to volunteer in one of the refugee shelters. Mr. Bader, now 90 years old, is a Holocaust survivor. Gerhart, a diminutive man, shared with me his two simple reasons for volunteering. First, he is well aware that most of these refugees from Arab countries in the Middle East, where they have been raised to hate Jews and detest Israel, had most likely never met a Jew. Bader surely being the first Holocaust survivor they've ever met. Their human interaction immediately challenges the propaganda they've been weaned on. Bader humbly serves as an ambassador for the Jewish people who has not lost hope in the goodness of humanity. Secondly, as a Jew, Mr. Bader feels an obligation to reach out to those most vulnerable. Gerhart Bader, to me, a giant of a man, is surely a hero. The depth of his moral courage and faith in humanity is immeasurable. He's gathered more than his share of holy sparks. Now, I don't want to over-romanticize my experience in Germany or view it through rose-colored glasses. There is, as you know, deep polarization in Germany today around Chancellor Merkel's decision to open up the borders to 1 million refugees when other European countries had tightly sealed their borders. It almost cost Merkel's re-election. And though I do take great pride that the German government was working with an Israeli NGO, Israel has its own challenges in how it chooses to deal with its own refugees. What I carried back to America was a clarity around our own immigration challenges and how faith communities like ours can and must be instrumental in fighting for responsible, compassionate immigration reform. What I carried back to my congregation was the ability to see more clearly the holy sparks for us to gather within our community. These sparks, for example, are manifest in dreamers, those 800,000 undocumented immigrants who arrived in the United States as children, seeking a pathway to permanent legal status. We gather those holy sparks by organizing and fighting for legislation on Capitol Hill that will make this their permanent home. Those sparks, yeah, you can clap at that. Those sparks are manifest in migrants who have been deported at the American-Mexican border crossing that we know follows the border of the Southwest. The most vulnerable, those with little but the shirt on their backs, We gather those sparks by treating them like human beings, each created in God's image, by listening to their stories, serving them a meal, providing clothes, first aid, and legal assistance, and a few bucks in their pocket through an organization called the Kino Border Initiative in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. And brothers and sisters, those sparks are manifest as well in our ability to hear and understand the fear of fellow Americans who look at immigrants as a threat to our country. Those perhaps are the most challenging sparks for us to gather, yet there is holiness there as well. Collecting sparks is an activist way to work for the common good. Fortunately, when we act for the welfare of others and pursue justice, we derive great satisfaction. When we give of ourselves, we are richer in return and spiritually nourished. This could be one of the saving graces of humanity. I would argue that our very survival depends upon it. Abraham Joshua Heschel reminds Jews that living our faith does not require a leap of faith, rather a leap of action. I think Heschel is speaking to all of us this morning. It's time to take a greater leap of action for us to pursue justice and peace. So I say, let's double down in our commitment within our respective faith communities built on the common foundation of values and ethics that we share. There are holy sparks all around us. Only by seeking and gathering together will we bring healing and wholeness to our world, that we may all live in peace under a vine and a fig tree. And after all, at the end of the day, we are in the same boat as we pull on the oars together. God bless you.